Imagine being told you're indispensable until the moment comes when your hard work goes unrecognized. What if that moment became the turning point to change everything? Serena Langley sat behind her desk at Ember's Diner, watching evening light dance across the polished countertop. She'd been brought in 3 years ago as the brand's turnaround specialist, given a sliver of promise that if she could revive the struggling chain, she would be elevated to the top seat. And she had delivered. Revenues had doubled, new locations thrived, and morale surged. Yet tonight, that promotion was nowhere to be found. Back when Serena first accepted the project, she'd been introduced to Marcus Dalton, CEO and founder of Ember's Diner. He had looked her in the eye and said, "Turn this place around, Serena, and the top spot is yours." It was a spark of hope that had driven her through every long night, every staff meeting, every strategy pivot. She assembled the best team she could find, dynamic, creative, hungry, and by some miracle, they rekindled the diner's flame. As she entered Dalton's office that evening, her heart pounded. She carried a folder thick with charts, profit margins climbing, customer satisfaction on the rise, and glowing press reviews for the refreshed brand identity. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward and said, "Marcus, I think it's time we talk about the CEO position." He leaned back, expression thoughtful, silent. 10 seconds felt like 10 minutes. Finally, he said quietly, "No." She blinked in confusion. "Not now?" she ventured. He shook his head. "Not ever." Her heart lurched. "Ever?" He shrugged. "I don't need to explain." Shock burned in her veins, but she forced calm. "I'll step out for now," she said, voice steady but stunned. "I'll head home and reflect." The next morning, she returned. "I've considered our conversation," she began. "I've given this my all, yet I've been passed over. I'm sorry, this just isn't working for me anymore." "Don't go," he said. "If you do, the stock will drop." It was the confirmation. She'd become essential, yet invisible. They struck a reluctant compromise. She'd help transition her team, then walk away. Leaving was painful but self-preserving. Serena packed her bag, shaking off the sting of betrayal as she walked through the empty hallways. The neon sign outside, the one with the flickering Ember's Diner glow, felt like a beacon of closure. A few weeks later, she received an unexpected offer. CEO of Pancake Haven, a rival breakfast chain collapsing under stale branding and falling sales. Without hesitation, she said yes. At Pancake Haven's cluttered headquarters, she found dusty decor, franchises struggling, a brand that had lost its way. For the next 5 years, Serena poured herself into a revival. Streamlined menus, refreshed logo, bold marketing campaigns. The chain rallied, customers returned, competitors began to notice. One evening, as numbers started turning decisive, Serena pitched an idea to the board. "If we don't expand through acquisition, we're inviting a takeover ourselves." They nodded, intrigued. Her research led her back to Ember's Diner, the chain she once revived and had been denied. It felt poetic. She prepared the proposal. Acquire Embers for $2.3 billion. Not out of vengeance, she reminded herself, but because it made strategic sense. Months later, all was official. Pancake Haven was joining forces with Embers under a new parent company, Hearth and Home Brands. Serena sat poised, ready to call Dalton. Morning came, Serena dialed. The phone clicked, and he answered with polite curiosity. "Marcus," she began, voice calm. "Good to talk. I'm calling to let you know that, as of today, Emma's Pancake Haven, under Hearth and Home, has acquired Ember's Diner." There was a pause. she continued. "We won't need 2 leaders at the top anymore." She watched him process. And she said, steady and clear, "I'm going to have to let you go." Silence on the other line. Then, nothing. That night, Serena stood alone in her office at Hearth & Home's sleek, modern headquarters. She thought of the charts she once clutched, of dusk-lit countertops and broken promises. Now, she sat in a building brighter, cleaner, and built on her conviction. A woman who was promised promise, denied justice, and ultimately claimed what she'd earned. Never let someone define your value. You may be overlooked today, but that doesn't determine your destiny. The right moment to achieve your place is often the one you create yourself. What do you do after finally taking back the power you were once denied? For Serena Langley, success was only the beginning. But with great victories come even greater battles. The boardroom at Hearth & Home Brands was bathed in soft morning light, reflecting off the glass table that now bore the weight of Serena's biggest decision yet. The acquisition of Ember's Diner had shaken the industry, and Serena was the woman everyone was talking about. Some called her bold, others called her ruthless. Serena preferred another word: prepared. But behind the confidence, there was a storm brewing. The deal had gone through, but the real work was only beginning. Integrating 2 massive companies wasn't just about numbers and contracts. It was about egos, expectations, and loyalty. And nowhere was that tension more palpable than with the employees who still idolized Marcus Dalton, the man she had just removed. Serena arrived at the newly combined headquarters a week later. The energy in the air was sharp, uncertain. She walked the long hallway lined with framed photos of Ember's early days. Grand openings, ribbon cuttings, even newspaper clippings from decades ago when the diner chain was still a rising star. At the far end of the hall, a cluster of employees paused as she walked by. Their smiles were polite, but their eyes told a different story. Curiosity, maybe resentment. She didn't blame them. "You don't just erase a legacy overnight," she muttered under her breath. Still, she carried herself with quiet authority as she stepped into the conference room. Waiting there were executives from both brands, some allies, some skeptics. "Good morning," Serena said, her voice even but firm. "Let's get one thing clear from the start. We're one company now, one team. I didn't come here to tear down what you've built. I came here to make it better." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room, though she could feel the skepticism like static in the air. Her plan was ambitious: merge the 2 companies' supply chains, unify branding, and modernize customer experience across the board. But to make that happen, she needed buy-in from everyone in the room. Later that evening, Serena sat alone in her corner office, staring out at the city lights. The adrenaline from the day had worn off, leaving her with the quiet hum of reality. She had won the battle. But what about the war? Her phone buzzed. It was a message from Mia Torres, her closest friend and unofficial confidant. "You did it. Don't let anyone dim that light. You earned this." Serena smiled faintly. Mia had been her anchor since the early Ember's days, always reminding her why she started. She typed back quickly. "Thanks, Mia. Just a lot to take in. This isn't over, not by a long shot." The next few months were a whirlwind. Serena poured herself into the integration, clocking 16-hour days, juggling endless meetings, and flying coast to coast to visit franchises. Slowly but surely, things began to change. Customers started noticing cleaner stores, faster service, and innovative menu items that combine the best of both worlds. Profits ticked upward. Investors, once hesitant, now praised her vision. But not everyone was happy. Anonymous emails began trickling into her inbox. Nothing threatening, but sharp enough to sting. Messages like, "You'll never be one of us. Dalton built this, you just bought it." At first, Serena ignored them, but the whispers grew louder. At company gatherings, she could feel the subtle shift. A few cold shoulders here, a forced smile there. One evening, after a particularly tense strategy meeting, Serena sat in her car in the parking garage, hands gripping the steering wheel. "Maybe they're right," she whispered. "Maybe I don't belong here." But then she remembered that night years ago, standing in Dalton's office, holding that folder of charts, hearing the word no. That moment, that humiliation, had fueled her rise. And now she refused to let doubt undo what she had built. Determined to prove herself, Serena launched an internal initiative to rebuild trust. She hosted open forums, invited honest feedback, and even spent weekends visiting local franchises unannounced, working side by side with employees, listening to their frustrations and ideas. It worked. Slowly, the resistance softened. People started to see her not as an outsider, but as someone who genuinely cared about the brand and its people. By the end of the year, morale was climbing, sales were surging, and Serena was finally beginning to feel at home in her own empire. Yet deep down, she knew this was only the calm before the next storm. Success had made her a target, not just from skeptics within the company, but from competitors circling, waiting for a chance to exploit any weakness. And when that moment came, Serena Langley would have to decide how far she was willing to go to protect what she had built. True leadership isn't just about achieving power. It's about earning trust, even when the odds are stacked against you. Respect is never handed to you. It's built day by day, choice by choice. Serena Langley sat in her glass-walled office, high above the city's streets. The hum of New York traffic below, muted by the sleek, modern design of Hearth & Home's headquarters. On paper, everything looked perfect. Quarterly profits were at an all-time high, customer satisfaction had climbed beyond expectations, and the stock price had doubled since the acquisition of Ember's Diner. But Serena knew better than to be lulled by numbers. Beneath the surface, cracks were beginning to show. Subtle, hairline fractures that only someone like her, with years of experience in corporate battlegrounds, could detect. Her assistant Nora stepped into the office, a folder in hand. "You'll want to see this," she said quietly. Serena gestured for her to come closer, eyes narrowing as she scanned the document. It was an anonymous report detailing internal sabotage. Several regional managers, holdovers loyal to Marcus Dalton, had been quietly undermining her initiatives. They weren't overtly breaking rules, but were dragging their feet on implementing changes, creating subtle disruptions that added up to serious delays. "Names?" Serena asked. Nora hesitated. "Not officially, but the pattern points to 3 regions in particular: Mid-Atlantic, Pacific Northwest, and Texas." Serena leaned back in her chair, exhaling slowly. "Dalton loyalists," she muttered. She had expected some resistance after taking control, but she hadn't anticipated this level of quiet rebellion. "Schedule a meeting with the regional heads," she instructed. "All of them. Tomorrow morning, first thing." The following day, the boardroom was tense as Serena entered, her heels clicking sharply against the polished floor. She scanned the room, locking eyes with each regional head in turn. Some met her gaze steadily, others looked away. "I've been patient," she began, her tone calm but edged with steel. "I've given this team room to adapt, to adjust. But patience isn't the same as weakness." No one spoke. "You've had your time to process change," she continued. Now it's time to execute. I won't tolerate sabotage, quiet or otherwise. We are one company, one vision. And if anyone here believes they can outlast me by dragging their feet, let me be clear. They will be replaced immediately. The silence in the room was heavy, broken only by the hum of the air conditioning. Finally, one regional head, a tall man from Dallas named Richard, leaned forward, his jaw tight. "You can't expect everyone to forget what happened overnight," he said. "Marcus built this company. He was more than a CEO to us. He was family." Serena met his gaze, unflinching. "Marcus built a foundation. I built a future. If you can't see the difference, you're in the wrong room." That night, back in her penthouse apartment, Serena poured herself a glass of wine and sat by the window overlooking the city. From this height, everything looked orderly, almost serene. A far cry from the turmoil she felt brewing beneath the surface of her empire. Her phone buzzed with a message from Mia. "Dinner tomorrow? You need a break. You look like you're carrying the weight of the world." Serena stared at the screen for a moment before typing a simple reply. "Tomorrow, 7 p.m., my place." When Mia arrived the next evening, she walked in with 2 bottles of wine and a knowing smile. "You've got that look again," she teased, "like you're about to declare war." Serena sighed, dropping onto the sofa. "Maybe I am. They're testing me, Mia. Some of Dalton's people are sabotaging the rollout. And the worst part? They think I don't notice." Mia settled next to her, uncorking the wine. "So what's the plan? Because I know you. You're not the type to just sit and wait." Serena swirled the deep red liquid in her glass, her mind already racing through strategies. "First, I need to rebuild loyalty. Not just compliance. Real loyalty. I need people who believe in this vision as much as I do. And second," she hesitated, her voice dropping, "I need to show them that crossing me has consequences." Over the next few weeks, Serena made her moves with surgical precision. She started with the Mid-Atlantic region, quietly replacing the regional manager with someone from her own team, a woman named Alana Pierce, known for her sharp instincts and ability to win people over. In the Pacific Northwest, she flew out herself, walking through stores unannounced, talking to employees directly, making it clear that she was present and paying attention. The managers there, realizing they couldn't hide behind distance, quickly fell in line. Texas, however, was different. Richard remained defiant, openly questioning her decisions during conference calls, dragging his feet on every directive. Serena knew it was only a matter of time before his defiance escalated, and when it did, she would be ready. One Friday evening, as Serena prepared to leave the office, Nora rushed in, her face pale. "You need to see this," she said, thrusting her tablet forward. On the screen was a leaked internal memo, one Serena had written weeks earlier, outlining plans for a major restructuring that hadn't yet been announced. The leak had spread across industry news sites within hours, sparking speculation and unease among investors. "Where did this come from?" Serena demanded. "We're still tracing it, but..." Nora hesitated. "It looks like it came from someone in the Texas office." Serena's jaw tightened. "Richard, get legal on the line," she said, her voice icy. "And prepare a termination package. By Monday, Richard is done." The fallout was swift and brutal. By Tuesday morning, Richard was out, escorted from the Texas office while Serena's hand-picked replacement stepped in. The message was clear. Betrayal had a cost. Not everyone approved of her tactics. Industry headlines called her a cold operator, while anonymous employees described her as unforgiving. But Serena didn't care. In her mind, this wasn't about being liked. It was about survival. Months passed, and slowly, the turbulence began to settle. The integration was finally taking root. Stores were modernizing faster, employee morale surveys showed improvement, and the stock continued to climb. But success came at a price. Serena's personal life was all but non-existent. Late nights at the office blurred into early mornings, and her phone rarely stopped buzzing. Even Mia, her most loyal friend, began to voice concern. "You can't keep running at this pace," Mia warned one night over dinner. "You're going to burn out." Serena smiled faintly, though the exhaustion in her eyes betrayed her. "I'll rest when this company is exactly where it needs to be, not a minute before." Then, just as things seemed to be stabilizing, a new threat emerged. A rival company, a fast-growing chain of upscale brunch spots called Morning Muse, began aggressively expanding into markets once dominated by Hearth and Home. At first, Serena dismissed them as a minor nuisance. But within 6 months, Morning Muse was everywhere. Trendy, buzzing with social media hype, and stealing younger customers in droves. By the time she called an emergency strategy session, the numbers were undeniable. Market share in key cities was slipping, and investors were starting to ask questions. "We underestimated them," admitted one of her executives during the meeting. "They're lean, innovative, and they know exactly how to connect with younger demographics." Serena leaned forward, her expression unreadable. "Then we stop underestimating them. I want a full analysis of their operations, marketing, supply chains, everything. If they're coming for us, we're going to be ready." But privately, Serena felt the pressure mounting like never before. This wasn't just about holding her ground. It was about proving, once again, that she belonged at the top. And deep down, she knew this was only the beginning of the next great battle. One that would test her vision, her leadership, and her ability to stay one step ahead in a game where the rules changed every single day. The first cracks appeared on a chilly Monday morning. Serena Langley stood in the boardroom, arms folded, staring at a massive screen displaying quarterly data. Bright red numbers bled across key markets: Chicago, Los Angeles, Miami. "Morning Muse," her analytics director said grimly, clicking to the next slide. "They've doubled their footprint in under 8 months. They're scooping up younger demographics and pulling traffic from our top-tier urban locations. At this rate," Serena cut in, her voice sharp but steady, "they'll eat 15% of our market share by the end of the year." No one argued. They all knew it was true. That night, Serena stayed in her office long after the city lights dimmed. The building was empty, quiet except for the hum of the HVAC system. She sat at her desk with a single task: understanding the enemy. She scrolled through Morning Muse's social channels. Their marketing was clean, aspirational, and, above all, personal. Influencers posting avocado toasts, hashtags like #morningmagic, perfectly curated images that screamed trendy but effortless. Her phone buzzed, a message from Mia. "Serena, you promised dinner. I'm calling in that promise tonight, no excuses." Serena typed a quick reply. "Another time, Mia, crisis mode." Then silenced her phone and went back to studying the competition. By Wednesday, she'd assembled a task force. 10 of her sharpest minds from marketing, operations, and analytics. They gathered in a private conference room, whiteboards filled with data and strategy outlines. "We can't win by imitating them," Serena began. "We have to be smarter, faster, better. Morning Muse is trendy, but trends fade. What doesn't fade is experience, creating something so memorable that customers can't imagine going anywhere else." The room buzzed with energy. Plans were drawn, campaigns outlined, new loyalty programs proposed. But Serena wasn't satisfied. She needed something bold, something disruptive. Then Alana Pierce, her trusted regional director from the Mid-Atlantic, leaned forward. What if we created an entirely new concept? A flagship experience, Hearth and Home 2.0. Serena paused. The idea was risky, expensive, untested, but it also had the spark she'd been looking for. "Build me a prototype," she said finally. "I want to see what Hearth and Home 2.0 looks like in 30 days." The following month was chaos. Architects, designers, marketing teams, everyone was in overdrive. Serena personally oversaw every detail, from menu redesigns to furniture selection. She barely slept, often crashing in her office for a few hours before jumping back into meetings. One evening, around midnight, Mia showed up unannounced. She found Serena hunched over blueprints, her hair pulled back, dark circles under her eyes. "Serena," Mia said softly, setting a takeout bag on the desk. "You're going to kill yourself if you keep this up." Serena didn't look up. "I don't have time to rest. Not until we launch." Mia stepped closer, her voice firmer. "You think you're fighting Morning Muse, but really you're fighting yourself. You've already won, Serena. You just don't see it." Serena finally met her gaze, the weight of exhaustion in her eyes. "If I stop now, everything I've built falls apart. I can't let that happen." 30 days later, the first Hearth and Home 2.0 location opened in downtown Manhattan. It was unlike anything the brand had ever done before. Sleek, modern interiors, locally sourced menus, interactive dining experiences that blurred the line between tradition and innovation. The launch was a spectacle. Influencers packed the opening night, their phones capturing every curated moment. By the next morning, #HearthHome 2.0 was trending nationwide. Sales skyrocketed. Customer reviews flooded in, glowing, excited, demanding more locations. Serena watched the numbers climb on her dashboard, a rare smile staining at her lips. For the first time in months, she felt like she was breathing again. But victory was fleeting. A week after the successful launch, a scandal erupted. A video leaked online showing a regional manager yelling at employees, berating them for not meeting new service quotas. The clip went viral within hours, sparking outrage across social media. By morning, #boycott. Hearth Home was trending. Investors were calling. Journalists were camped outside the headquarters. Serena convened an emergency meeting, her voice cold and precise as she addressed her team. "Find out how this happened," she ordered, "and find out who leaked the video." Nora, always efficient, looked up from her tablet. "The manager in the video has already been suspended. We're drafting a statement, but the narrative is out of our control right now." Serena's jaw tightened. She knew the damage wasn't just about one video. It was about perception. And perception, once poisoned, was nearly impossible to repair. By nightfall, Serena was on the phone with Alana. "This isn't just bad luck," Serena said. "Someone is orchestrating this. First the memo leak, now this. Someone wants to see me fail." Alana hesitated. "Do you think it's someone inside?" One Friday evening, as Serena prepared to leave the office, Nora rushed in, her face pale. "You need to see this," she said, thrusting her tablet forward. On the screen was a leaked internal memo, one Serena had written weeks earlier, outlining plans for a major restructuring that hadn't yet been announced. The leak had spread across industry news sites within hours, sparking speculation and unease among investors. "Where did this come from?" Serena demanded. "We're still tracing it, but..." Nora hesitated. "It looks like it came from someone in the Texas office." Serena's jaw tightened. "Richard, get legal on the line," she said, her voice icy. "And prepare a termination package. By Monday, Richard is done." The fallout was swift and brutal. By Tuesday morning, Richard was out, escorted from the Texas office while Serena's hand-picked replacement stepped in. The message was clear. Betrayal had a cost. Not everyone approved of her tactics. Industry headlines called her a cold operator, while anonymous employees described her as unforgiving. But Serena didn't care. In her mind, this wasn't about being liked. It was about survival. "I don't think," Serena replied flatly. "I know." The next morning, Serena called in her head of security, a quiet, meticulous man named Ethan Cross. "I want you to audit everything," she told him. "Emails, messages, phone logs, discreetly. If there's a mole in this company, I want a name." Ethan nodded. Understood. Weeks passed. The scandal began to fade as Hearth & Home launched a massive apology campaign, donating to employee wellness programs and implementing new training initiatives. Public sentiment started to recover, slowly, cautiously, but Serena didn't let her guard down. When Ethan finally walked into her office one Thursday morning, she knew by his expression that he'd found something. "It's a senior-level leak," Ethan said, placing a folder on her desk. "All signs point to Damien Cole." Serena froze. Damien was her chief marketing officer, someone she'd trusted for years. "You're certain?" she asked, her voice dangerously quiet. Ethan nodded. "He's been feeding information to a PR firm that works with Morning Muse. Payment trails confirm it." Serena didn't hesitate. By noon, Damien was escorted out of the building. By evening, the board received a detailed report of his betrayal, but the damage was deeper than Serena wanted to admit. The leak had given Morning Muse a blueprint of Hearth & Home's upcoming strategies. And then, the final blow. A week later, Morning Muse announced a nationwide rollout of a concept strikingly similar to Hearth & Home 2.0, faster, cheaper, and already generating buzz. Serena stared at the press release on her phone, her hands trembling with a mix of rage and disbelief. "They're playing my game," she whispered to herself, "and they think they can beat me at it." She rose from her desk, determination hardening every line of her face. "Call an executive session," she told Nora. "Tonight. I don't care how late it is. We're not going down without a fight." By midnight, the top executives of Hearth & Home were seated in the boardroom, their faces drawn with tension. Serena stood at the head of the table, eyes blazing. "They think we're going to play defense," she said. "They think we're going to panic. They're wrong. This is our moment to strike, harder, faster, and smarter than they ever could." Her voice grew sharper, commanding. "By next quarter, we're launching a second wave of innovation. Not just a restaurant, but an entire ecosystem. Loyalty programs, tech-driven experiences, partnerships with brands that matter. If Morning Muse wants a war, we'll give them one they'll never forget." The room erupted into action. Teams were assigned, deadlines set, the battle lines were drawn. And as dawn broke over the city, Serena stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of her office, watching the first light spill across the skyline. She wasn't tired. She wasn't scared. She was ready. The city was still asleep when Serena Langley arrived at the Hearth & Home headquarters. The sky was a deep indigo, just beginning to bleed into pale morning light. Her black sedan pulled into the underground garage, the tires screeching slightly as she braked hard. her mind already racing ahead. She didn't even stop for coffee. Not today. Not when every second mattered. By 6:00 a.m., the war room was alive with energy. Maps of key markets covered the walls, digital dashboards lit up with live analytics, and the hum of quiet conversations filled the air. The company's elite strike team, operations, tech, marketing, supply chain, were all there waiting for her. Serena stepped in, her presence immediately commanding attention. She looked around the room, her gaze sharp and unrelenting. "Morning, everyone," she said, her voice steady but charged. "Let's get started. Where are we?" Nora, ever efficient, pulled up the latest reports. Morning, Muse rolled out their new concept in 6 pilot cities. Social engagement is off the charts. They're positioning themselves as the affordable alternative to Hearth & Home 2.0. They've also secured a partnership with StreamVibe, which is funneling massive traffic to their app. "Margins?" Serena asked without missing a beat. "Thin," Nora replied. "They're burning through cash to gain traction. But if they hold this pace, they could tip the balance in under 6 months." A low murmur rippled through the room. Serena silenced it with a single look. "We're not letting them get that far," she said coldly. "By the end of this quarter, we'll make Hearth & Home untouchable." The next few weeks blurred into an unrelenting storm of strategy meetings, product development, and high-level negotiations. Serena worked 18-hour days, her team matching her pace, driven by her intensity. They launched HearthSync, a proprietary app that integrated loyalty rewards, mobile ordering, and an AI-driven dining experience that felt both personalized and futuristic. Customers could walk into any location and be greeted by name, their usual orders queued up before they even sat down. By the end of the first month, app downloads had exploded past projections. Locations in New York, Dallas, and Seattle reported record-breaking sales. But Serena knew better than to celebrate too soon. Late one night, she sat in her corner office, the city light shimmering below. Her reflection stared back at her from the glass, eyes shadowed with exhaustion, but sharp as ever. The phone on her desk rang. She almost ignored it, but the caller ID made her pause. It was Ethan Cross. "Talk to me," Serena said, picking up. "You were right." Ethan's voice came through low and tense. "This isn't just corporate competition. Someone's actively undermining us. Again." Serena's grip on the phone tightened. "How deep does it go?" "Deep?" Ethan said. "I've traced multiple data breaches over the last 3 months. Whoever's feeding Morning Muse isn't just copying, they're embedded in our systems. And they're good." "How good?" "Military-level encryption good," Ethan replied grimly. "This isn't some rogue employee. This is organized." The realization hit Serena like ice water. This wasn't a business rival playing dirty. This was sabotage on a level that could cripple her company if she didn't act fast. "Shut it down," she said. "All of it. Lock every system, audit every account, and find the leak." Ethan hesitated. "Serena, this is going to get messy. If we're dealing with an external network." "I don't care," she cut in sharply. "Find them. I don't care what it takes." The next morning, Serena walked into the boardroom with the weight of the world pressing on her shoulders, but none of it showing on her face. Her executives were already seated, the tension in the room palpable. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "we are not just in a market battle anymore. We are under attack, and I will not sit by and watch everything we've built get destroyed." Gasps rippled through the room as she laid out the evidence Ethan had compiled. Server logs, communication traces, proof of targeted data breaches. One board member, an older man named Gregory Haynes, leaned forward. Serena, this is serious. We should consider pulling back, slowing down expansion until... No! Serena snapped, her voice slicing through the air like a blade. That's exactly what they want. Retreat is not an option. As the meeting adjourned, Nora caught up to her in the hallway. Serena, Nora said carefully, you can't keep running on fumes. You need rest. If you collapse, this company collapses with you. Serena paused, her expression softening for just a moment. I'll rest when this is over, she said quietly. Not before. The pressure only intensified over the following weeks. Every day brought a new challenge. A delayed shipment, a security breach, a social media storm sparked by rumors planted by anonymous sources. Through it all, Serena pushed forward, her focus razor sharp, her resolve unbreakable. But cracks were beginning to show. One night, long after midnight, Mia stormed into her office. Serena, this isn't sustainable, Mia said, slamming her hands down on the desk. You're burning yourself alive. For what? So you can say you won a war no one will remember in 10 years? Serena looked up from her laptop, her eyes glassy but defiant. This isn't about ego, Mia. This is about survival. If we don't win, thousands of people lose their jobs. Entire families. I can't let that happen. And what about you? Mia shot back. When was the last time you slept more than 3 hours? Ate a meal that wasn't takeout? Talk to me about anything other than hearth and home? Serena had no answer. By the end of the quarter, Hearth and Home had not only weathered the storm, but gained significant ground. The sabotage attempts were traced, isolated, and neutralized, though the identity of the mastermind remained just out of reach. Serena stood in front of the board, presenting the latest numbers. Revenue up 18% quarter over quarter, she said. Customer retention up 22%. Morning Muse is scrambling to keep pace, but their growth has already started to plateau. The room erupted in quiet applause. For a brief moment, Serena allowed herself to feel the victory. But deep down, she knew this was far from over. 2 days later, Ethan walked into her office, his expression grim. We found something, he said, placing a USB drive on her desk. Serena looked up sharply. What is it? Proof, Ethan said. Proof of who's behind this, but you're not going to like it. Serena plugged in the drive, her heart pounding as the files opened on her screen. The name that appeared made her blood run cold. It wasn't a rival CEO. It wasn't a rogue employee. It was someone she had once called a friend. The betrayal cut deeper than Serena could have imagined. And as she stared at the evidence on her screen, one thought crystallized in her mind. This war had just become personal. The moment Serena Langley saw the name glowing on her screen, the air in her office turned heavy. Carter Voss. Her mind replayed every meeting, every handshake, every late-night strategy session with him. Carter, the man who had once mentored her when she was still cutting her teeth in the restaurant industry. Carter, the man who had taught her how to negotiate with sharks and come out unscathed. And now, Carter, the ghost behind every breach, every leak, every calculated attempt to destroy Hearth and Home. For a few seconds, the only sound in the room was the quiet hum of her computer. Then Serena's hand curled into a fist, nails digging into her palm. Why? She whispered, though no one was there to hear her. By the time she called Ethan back into her office, the initial wave of shock had burned away, leaving only a white-hot resolve. Are you certain? Serena asked, her tone sharp but steady. Ethan nodded grimly. Positive. The digital trail is clean, but not clean enough. Carter set up shell accounts, offshore servers, the whole playbook. But he made a mistake. One of the servers pinged back from his own private network 3 weeks ago. Serena leaned back in her chair, exhaling slowly. So Carter built Morning Muse to take us down. And he's close, Ethan said. Too close. If we don't move now, this won't just be about market share. He'll dismantle everything you've built. That night, Serena couldn't sleep. She sat in her penthouse, the city lights glittering far below, a glass of untouched whiskey in her hand. She thought about the girl she used to be, the hungry, determined 20-something who had looked up to Carter like a hero. And she thought about the woman she had become, a CEO, a leader, someone who had rebuilt her world from ashes more than once. No more playing defense. The next morning, Serena walked into the war room with a fire in her eyes that silenced the room instantly. "Carter Voss thinks he can break us," she said, her voice like steel. "He thinks he knows me, but he has forgotten one thing. I don't break. Not anymore." The room erupted into quiet, charged murmurs. Ethan stepped forward, placing a folder on the table. "We have enough to expose him," Ethan said. "Emails, financial records, everything tying him to the breaches. If we go public, he'll be finished." Serena's eyes narrowed. "No, not yet. Public exposure will make him desperate. He'll burn everything on his way down. We need to dismantle him quietly, strategically, and make sure he never gets back up." The operation, codenamed Project Phoenix, began that afternoon. Every department moved in unison. Legal teams prepared airtight cases. Cybersecurity experts built digital firewalls so strong they could withstand military-grade attacks. Marketing quietly shifted their narrative, positioning Hearth and Home as the resilient underdog rising against shadowy forces. And Serena became the center of the storm, orchestrating every move, anticipating every counterstrike. 3 weeks later, the trap was set. Carter was scheduled to present Morning Muse's innovative expansion plan at a high-profile industry summit in Chicago. Unbeknownst to him, Hearth and Home had secured exclusive data rights that morning, legal proof that Morning Muse had built its core systems on stolen intellectual property. Serena flew to Chicago the night before, her nerves razor-sharp, but her resolve unshakable. She didn't sleep. She didn't need to. The next day, as Carter stood on stage, smiling for the cameras, Serena walked into the room. The crowd murmured as she moved to the front row, her tailored navy suit cutting a sharp silhouette against the bright lights. Carter froze mid-sentence, his confident grin faltering for the briefest of moments. When their eyes met, Serena smiled, a cool, sharp smile that held no warmth. The fallout was swift and merciless. Within hours, Hearth and Home released a meticulously crafted statement exposing the entire web of sabotage, backed by undeniable proof. News outlets exploded with coverage. Morning Muse's stock plummeted 48% in a single day. By the end of the week, Carter Voss was ousted by his own board, his reputation in ruins. And Serena Langley? She stood taller than ever. But victory came at a cost. The weeks of relentless stress had taken their toll, not just on Serena, but on her entire team. Nora had been working 18-hour days. Ethan hadn't seen his family in weeks. Serena hadn't spoken to Mia properly in nearly 2 months. One quiet evening, long after the noise had died down, Serena returned to her office. She stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, staring out at the skyline that had once made her feel invincible. The door opened softly behind her. "You did it," Mia's voice said, soft but steady. Serena turned to see her standing there, arms crossed. a mixture of pride and exhaustion in her eyes. "We did it," Serena corrected. Mia walked closer, her gaze unwavering. "And now what? What happens when the fight is over?" Serena hesitated, her throat tight. For the first time in a long time, she didn't have an answer. The following weeks were quieter, calmer. Hearth and Home stabilized, then thrived. The new HearthSync app reached 10 million active users. New partnerships blossomed. But Serena knew something had to change. She had built an empire, yes, but somewhere along the way, she had almost lost herself. One Friday evening, she gathered her leadership team in the main conference room. "I owe you all something," Serena began, her voice softer than they'd ever heard. "I owe you time, balance, gratitude. We've been running so hard for so long that we forgot why we started this in the first place. That ends now." She paused, scanning the room. "We're going to take a step back. Not to slow down, but to build smarter. To lead with vision, not fear. Hearth and Home isn't just a company. It's people. It's us. And I won't forget that again." The room was silent for a moment, then filled with quiet applause. In the months that followed, Hearth and Home didn't just grow. It flourished. Serena invested in wellness programs for her employees, restructured leadership to create more balance, and made time, real time, for the people who mattered, including Mia. One evening, sitting on their balcony overlooking the city, Mia leaned her head on Serena's shoulder. "You know," Mia said softly, "you're allowed to be happy. You don't have to keep fighting." Serena smiled, the tension in her chest finally loosening. "I know," she whispered, "but maybe this time, I'll fight for something better." Months later, Serena returned to the Chicago summit. This time, not as a warrior, but as a visionary. She spoke about resilience, about rebuilding, about the cost of ambition and the strength it takes to rise after every fall. When she stepped off the stage, the standing ovation wasn't for a CEO who had crushed her rivals. It was for a woman who had learned how to lead and how to live. In the end, Serena Langley didn't just build a company. She built a legacy. One of fire and grit and the quiet strength to start over, again and again, until she finally found not just victory, but peace. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends.